Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. I got involved with Joel out of a sense of obligation. It took 3 years for this obsessive, controlling man to accept me. At 20, I registered our marriage, then unexpectedly got pregnant and gave birth to Lucas. By the time Lucas turned 7, I was still waiting for a wedding. Joel was always insecure, constantly testing my boundaries, repeatedly trying to confirm whether I truly loved him. My son followed his example, never learning to respect me. Then one day my mother passed away. After handling her cremation all by myself, I dragged my exhausted body back home, only to find my son, unaware of what had happened, had deliberately locked me out of the house. Chapter 1. It was pouring rain outside. I took off my coat and used it to cover the urn, pressing the doorbell over and over again. It was only early evening, but the sky was already dark. Heavy clouds pressed low above me, with occasional flashes of lightning and the roar of thunder. The wind howled like it was the end of the world, just like my heart. My sobs were drowned by the relentless downpour, the sky crying with me as the tears soaked me completely. By the time I stopped pressing the doorbell, I was pounding the door with clenched fists, nearly gritting my teeth in frustration. Inside the small villa, the lights on the first floor were bright, and I could faintly see the large TV screen in the living room playing a cheerful cartoon. Joel was away on a business trip, but my own son Lucas was inside the warm house. He wasn't deaf. He could hear me. He was doing this on purpose. Changing the door code after I left had become one of his favorite pranks, happening time and time again. It seemed my persistent doorbell ringing had finally irritated him. Lucas pressed the intercom and snapped. "Why didn't you take the spare key when you left? You're so dumb. Figure it out yourself." His young voice, distorted through the machine, sounded harsh and unfamiliar in the noisy environment. I leaned against the corner of the wall, wiping the rain and tears from my eyes as I tried to protect the urn in my arms. I didn't want my mother to get wet. I couldn't take care of her when she was alive, and now that she was gone, this was the only thing I could do for her. I suppressed the lump in my throat, forcing myself to speak coldly to Lucas. "I'm telling you for the last time, Lucas, open the door." The intercom flickered, and I could hear a bit of the TV in the background. Then nothing. The small light in front of me went out. The world fell silent. I leaned against the wall, my eyes red, my body stiff, standing like a statue in the storm. Maybe a long time passed, or maybe just a moment. I calmly accepted the reality that I had lost my son. I smiled slightly, blinking away the tears, and whispered to my mother, "It's okay, Mom. Let's go. I'll take you home." With that, I turned and walked away into the rain without looking back. Starting today, I lost my mother. And Lucas lost his too. Chapter 2. I took a cab back to the Southern District. There aren't many fancy high-rise buildings here, just a collection of old, worn-out apartment complexes. But I felt a sense of peace and relief like never before. As I climbed the narrow, dimly lit staircase, the warm yellow motion sensor lights turned on with each step, as if they were welcoming me, saying, "It's been a while. Welcome home." But when I reached the 5th floor and stood in front of my familiar door, I realized with a sinking feeling that my pockets were empty. Water dripped from my soaked pants, quickly pooling at my feet. A gust of cold wind swept through the hallway, sending chills up my arms and raising goosebumps. I didn't hesitate for too long and turned to knock on my neighbor's door. Soon, the door opened, revealing a young woman with messy hair, wearing pajamas and holding half an apple in her mouth. She looked at me, and I looked at her, both of us frozen for a moment. I had expected the familiar aunt I knew to answer the door, but instead, I blinked slowly, letting the raindrops fall from my eyelashes, and forced a polite smile. "Sorry to bother you, but I remember my mom left a spare key with you. Could you please give it to me?" My former best friend, Clara, took the apple from her mouth and looked at me for a while, her gaze complicated as she took in my bedraggled appearance. Then in a cold, distant voice she said, "Wait a moment." She went inside, rummaged around, and handed me the key. I took it, whispering a small thank you, and then silence. I didn't have the energy to deal with our broken relationship at that moment. I gave her a half-hearted smile, then used the key to open the door to my own apartment and stepped inside. I turned on the light, and the sudden brightness stung my tired eyes, causing more tears to fall down my cheeks. The apartment was spotless, just as I remembered it. Everything was in its place, as if my mother had just stepped out to buy groceries and would be back any minute. I carefully placed the urn on the table. My fingers brushed against a thin layer of dust on the surface and I froze. The tears came rushing down, unstoppable. I had helped her escape a failed marriage, freeing her from that cheating, abusive scumbag. I had promised to buy her a big house to give her the life she deserved. But she always refused. She said she was already living well. Her daughter was married now, and she didn't want me to feel torn between two homes, worried that I'd be mistreated in my new family. All the money I had sent her over the years, she had quietly saved away. It turned into a small savings book along with her ashes, one of the few things she left me. After my mom divorced, her favorite thing to do was look through the photo albums of Lucas and me. Her rough hands would leave marks of longing on the glossy pages. But whenever I invited her to stay at my home for a few days to spend more time with her grandson, she would usually leave after just one meal. Joel didn't like having outsiders in his house. Though polite, he was always cold toward her. And Lucas, no matter how much I scolded him, always wore his irritation and disdain for his grandmother on his face. I thought I had time to change all of that. But I didn't know my mother had cancer. She hid it from me, refusing to tell me. By the time I found out and took her to the hospital for treatment, it was already too late. I sat in the chair silently crying, consumed with guilt and regret. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. I thought Lucas had brought the driver to come find me, and I immediately frowned, filled with anger as I went to open the door. But standing outside was Clara, holding a tray of ginger tea along with a chubby little boy about 4 or 5 years old. Seeing me frozen in place, Clara sighed. She pulled the little boy inside without hesitation and said, "You're soaked to the bone. Aren't you going to take a shower and change? Do you want to catch a cold?" Chapter 3. The house still had many of my old clothes neatly washed and folded by my mother, stored away in the wardrobe. After I finished my shower and stepped out, my eyes red and puffy, I was taken aback by the scene before me. The TV was on, the little boy sat quietly on the couch watching, and Clara was skillfully cleaning the house with a rag. When she saw me come out, the boy immediately turned and sweetly called out, "Hi, godmother." I stood there, towel in hand, dumbfounded, staring at Clara. She handed me a bowl of freshly cooked porridge, gesturing for me to eat, and calmly introduced herself. "This is my son Oscar. He's 5. I almost choked on the porridge, my eyes widening in disbelief. "You got married?" It wasn't that I was overreacting. It's just that ever since our school days, Clara had been a staunch advocate of never getting married. She had even made countless plans about how we'd open an elderly care home together when we got old. Clara raised an eyebrow and said, "Who said you need to get married to have a kid? Helen, you're out of touch with the times." She explained that Oscar was the child she had with her most handsome ex-boyfriend. Though they didn't last long, they had split amicably. The guy knew about the child and occasionally sent money for support. He was good to Oscar. But last year he got married, and to avoid any complications, Clara had cut ties with him. I glanced at Oscar with a bit of concern. What about him? So many years of friendship and our understanding was still there. Clara didn't need me to finish my sentence to know what I meant. She casually waved her hand, and Oscar immediately jumped off the couch, huffing as he ran over, tilting his head up to look at his mom, his bright puppy-like eyes shining. Clara smiled, pinching his chubby cheeks. "He's carefree like me. He doesn't care who his dad is." Clara patted the back of his head, and Oscar immediately turned to me, wrapping his short arms around my leg. In his sweet childish voice he said, "Godmother, you're so pretty. Can you be my mommy too?" That word, mommy, left me a little dazed. Lucas had become a little tyrant at home, growing more rebellious over the years. He took pleasure in playing pranks on me, using a child's pure malice to hurt me, and he seemed to enjoy watching me get upset. At some point he stopped calling me Mom. He started addressing me by my full name. It had been so long since I heard him call me Mom. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat, but Oscar's mommy brought a rare sense of joy to my heart. I crouched down, pinched his cheeks and smiled. "I already reserved the position of your godmother before you were even born. So of course I can be your mommy too." Oscar cheered, throwing his little arms around my neck, cuddling up to me affectionately. He really was like a fluffy golden retriever puppy. Much cuter than Lucas. From above, Clara's sarcastic voice chimed in. I thought someone had completely forgotten all our promises. How could I forget? You're my best friend in the world. If it weren't for marrying Joel, who forcibly isolated me, refusing to let me contact anyone for a long time, we wouldn't have drifted apart like this. Speak of the devil. Suddenly my phone rang. The caller was Joel. Chapter 4. Where are you? As soon as I answered, that familiar, slightly irritated yet lazy magnetic voice came through the line. Clara gestured for Oscar to lower the volume on the TV, then crossed her arms and stood to the side, glaring at me. Oscar glanced at his mom, then mimicked her stance, folding his little arms and blinking his big eyes at me. The two of them looked like they were cut from the same mold, and I couldn't help but smile. Joel, having heard nothing from me, was silent for a moment. His tone softened a bit, almost coaxing. Lucas couldn't sleep. He wants you to read him a bedtime story, Helen. Don't hold a grudge against the child. There it was again. Every time Lucas and I had a conflict, this was all Joel ever said. Don't hold a grudge against the child. As if no matter what Lucas did wrong, no matter how he hurt me, I wasn't supposed to hold it against him. Because Lucas idolized him. All those little needle-like jabs, sharp and constant, never reached Joel. He thought it was no big deal, just harmless mischief. A child's playfulness that adults shouldn't take seriously. I let out a soft sigh, feeling exhausted. I really didn't want to argue anymore. Calmly I asked, when are you coming back? On the other end of the line, Joel chuckled, as if he was smugly thinking, I knew you'd ask that. Just before he left on his business trip, his overly flirtatious secretary sent me a picture. In the photo, the petite secretary was clinging to Joel, her small hands clutching his loosely tied necktie. Joel's tall, lean figure stood by the office desk, his arms braced behind him, his dark lashes casting shadows over his eyes. There was the faintest hint of a smile on his thin lips. Though nothing explicit was shown, the pose and the atmosphere were undeniably intimate. Anyone could see something wasn't right. At that time, I was already overwhelmed by the stress of my mother's worsening illness. Seeing that photo, I couldn't hold back my anger. I exploded and had a huge fight with Joel. Of course, it was mostly me shouting. Joel just stood there calmly watching me, amused by my jealousy and frustration. Only when I was too upset to continue did he finally speak, as if it was beneath him to explain. His excuse this time? The secretary had been tying his tie and accidentally fell into his arms. He didn't even touch her. I demanded to know why anyone else had to tie his tie. Sure, he didn't touch her, but he didn't push her away immediately either, did he? As a married man, did he not have any boundaries? Joel had tried to soothe me with a few words, but this time I refused to back down. His expression turned cold, and he told me I needed to calm down. Then he left for the office, and the next day he went on this business trip. The most ridiculous part one found out about his trip was through that same secretary. That's when the silent treatment began. In the past, it never lasted more than 3 days. I always ended up being the one to make peace. This time, Joel was still waiting for me to apologize first. But now, 7 or 8 days had passed, and Joel was still waiting for a call that wasn't coming. It just so happened that Lucas had complained to him, so Joel took the opportunity to call me, offering me an easy way out. After a soft chuckle as I expected, he asked, You know you were wrong, right? He was waiting for me to apologize, admit my mistake, and soothe his ego with sweet words. Only once he was satisfied, once I had comforted him enough, would he graciously forgive me and then, as a reward, tell me that he would be coming back tomorrow. 10 years, and he never got tired of using this tactic. But now I am tired of it. I stayed silent for a long time. Long enough for Joel to notice that something was off. He called out to me, testing the waters. Honey. I imitated his soft chuckle. My tone so calm it was like I was discussing the weather. Joel, come back soon. Let's get a divorce. Chapter 5. That night, Clara and I lay in bed together for the first time in ages. Oscar wanted to sleep between us, but Clara picked him up and moved him to the side near the wall. At first, he flailed his little arms and legs in protest, but within a minute, he was sound asleep, snoring softly like a little pig. Kids sure have great sleep quality. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, unable to close my eyes. Clara rolled over, draping her arm over me, gently patting my back. Tears welled up, and I turned my head to look at her, my voice choking with emotion. Mom, she's gone. Clara had seen the urn. She knew. After a moment of silence, she hugged me and continued to pat my back, offering no empty words of comfort, just the one thing that had carried us through more than 20 years of friendship. Sweetheart, I'm here. That night I felt like a piece of driftwood, lost and aimless in the deep sea, having left the safe harbor of my mother's arms. But in the little boat of friendship, I found a brief moment of hope, a chance to breathe. There was no love, and I no longer needed love. With Clara and Oscar by my side, I pulled myself together enough to start arranging my mother's funeral. But a day later, Joel showed up at my doorstep with Lucas in tow. He was tall and striking, dressed in a sleek, expensive silver gray suit, his hair perfectly styled, making his already handsome features even more striking. In his hands was a bouquet of delicate pink orchids, softening his otherwise cold and distant aura. With a faint smile on his lips, as if nothing had happened, he said, "Helen, I'm here to take you home." He knew how much I cared about appearances, or I wouldn't have endured this self-inflicted torture of being with him for so long. Every time he pushed me to the edge, I'd want to lash out, but one look at his handsome face and my anger would evaporate, dropping by at least 3 notches. But this time I felt nothing. I looked at him calmly and said, "I've already drafted the divorce papers. They're in our bedroom drawer. If everything looks good to you, let's set a time to sign them." The smile vanished from Joel's lips. He stared at me, his gaze dark and intense. When he saw that I wasn't joking or being impulsive, he paused. Then, avoiding the topic of divorce, he looked down and pushed the well-dressed boy at his feet toward me. His voice was cold and detached. "Lucas, apologize to your mother." Lucas, dressed head to toe in branded athletic wear, stuffed his hands in his pockets, his face scowling in an attempt to look cool. Without looking at me, his eyes fixed on the stairs, he muttered with obvious reluctance, "Sorry." Joel smiled as he looked up, but there was no warmth in his eyes. "Is that enough?" he asked. "So this is how they saw me all along. So easy to fool. These two, they really thought I was an idiot." My response was simple. I slammed the door in their faces. Chapter 6. Joel didn't seem to register what had just happened. It wasn't until a moment later that my phone suddenly rang. I answered, and his irritated voice came through, though he was clearly trying to control his temper. "Helen, do you really have to act like this? Acting like this? This was acting up? Then what about all the times Joel threw his countless tantrums with me? Should I call that being pathetic?" I let out a cold laugh and replied, "You don't have to come find me, Joel. Now when I see the two of you, all I feel is disgust." Joel's breathing hitched sharply. I had never spoken to him like that before. Even when I was young and used to cry my heart out after he'd hurt me, I had never shown him this level of revulsion and exhaustion. To him, I was supposed to be the one person in the world who loved him the most, the one who cared for him more than anyone. How could I ever bring myself to say something so cruel? His labored breathing revealed a flash of panic, as if he was terrified I might say something even more hurtful. He quickly hung up the phone. I sat back on the couch, still holding the phone, and exhaled a long, deep breath. The truth is, Joel and I were never meant to be. We were from 2 completely different worlds. Joel came from a prestigious family. Both of his parents were giants in the business world. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, good-looking and adored by everyone. A true golden boy. The only real gap in his life was his parents' constant absence due to their demanding careers, leaving his grandmother to raise him. But his grandmother was old, and she spoiled him endlessly. When she couldn't keep up with him, she let him run wild, indulging his every whim and turning young Joel into an arrogant and uncontrollable brat. That was until Joel was kidnapped. The kidnappers were violent and cruel, not only demanding a huge ransom, but also indulging in some truly disturbing habits. Although Joel was eventually rescued unharmed, his spirit was shattered, and his personality changed drastically. No one knew what he had gone through during that time. Even after his rescue, his parents remained busy with work, leaving his grandmother to watch over him, full of guilt year after year. As for me, I had been in a terrible car accident. My family couldn't afford the medical bills, and the person who hit me was even poorer than we were. I was lying in that hospital bed, awaiting death, when Joel's grandmother saved me. At the time, she was already very old, sitting in a wheelchair and leaning on her cane. Her face was worn with age and exhaustion, but her eyes still gleamed with a sharp intelligence. She investigated my family background and spent a few days getting to know me. Then she asked me if I would be willing to make a deal with her. She said that she had saved my life, and in return she hoped I would save her grandson. Her grandson Joel was still young, handsome and highly intelligent, but dark and withdrawn with thorns all over him, unable to integrate into the real world. She didn't want to watch helplessly as Joel wasted his life away, or allowed him to spiral toward self-destruction. But she didn't have much time left. I didn't know how to repay such a life-saving debt. It didn't seem like I had much of a choice. I could only agree. That day was just 3 days before I was supposed to start college, a milestone I had worked so hard to achieve. I had already planned everything. I would work part-time while studying, graduate, find a good job, and help my mom divorce that scumbag. I would give her the good life she deserved. My future had seemed bright and within reach. But in reality, while my mother did successfully get her divorce, I never went to college. Instead, I was sent to Joel's home, where I dedicated myself entirely to reaching him, warming him, healing him, letting him climb out of his darkness using my own bones and blood as his ladder. By the time he was finally willing to step out of his safety zone and embrace the light, my fate had long been bound to his. His grandmother passed away peacefully, without regret. But she never told me how much of this life-saving debt I had to repay. How much longer, after all these years of help and sacrifices, would I still owe? Chapter 7. Joel didn't know the truth about all of this. He was already completely dependent on me. Even though I had been by his side for 3 years, he still feared that I would suddenly disappear and leave him, so he wanted to tie me to him forever. As soon as I was of age, he couldn't wait to marry me. But even with the marriage certificate in hand, he still wasn't at ease. Every day he would find new ways to ask me over and over, "Do you love me?" I would tirelessly answer, "I guess I do. Yes, I love you." After all, I had come into Joel's life at 17. Before that, I was so focused on my studies that I had never dated anyone. Besides, Joel was very handsome. Sometimes, when he lowered his long lashes and stared at me without blinking, my heart would genuinely skip a beat. His condition improved significantly after I became pregnant with Lucas. Around that same time, Joel discovered, much to his fury, that his parents had hidden the fact that they had another son, a brother who was nearly 10 years old. He was livid and began fighting for power within the family company. Joel was incredibly smart, and during those years of isolating himself, he had read extensively and studied hard. Combined with his striking appearance, he quickly made a name for himself in the business world. He no longer feared the outside world and slowly became captivated by the allure of wealth and luxury. Gradually, he started to neglect me, but he still clung to his habit of provoking my emotions, enjoying watching me react to his behavior, relishing in my jealousy. From these intense emotions, he derived the love he so desperately needed. It's been 10 years now. The woman in the mirror has fine lines beginning to form at the corners of her eyes, her gaze hollow and tired, as if all life has been drained from her. Meanwhile, Joel looks like a phoenix rising from the ashes. More mature, more handsome, and even more dignified. It's as if time has barely touched his flawless, striking face. But I find myself struggling to remember. What was 17-year-old Helen like when she met 20-year-old Joel? What was 23-year-old Joel like when he was so full of love for me, so desperate to marry me that he couldn't sleep without holding me every night? I can't quite recall, but I do remember that we never had our wedding. Joel once promised me a grand wedding, one that would captivate the entire city. But I told him it was too extravagant and unnecessary. So he said fine, he would buy me a castle, fill it with flowers, and under a sea of blossoms it would be just the two of us. He would confess his love to me first, then ask me countless times, "Do you love me?" And all I would need to say is, "Yes." There would be no need for witnesses. He would remember that moment forever, and for eternity he would love me. 10 years have passed, and those painful yet happy years of youth are now behind me. My mother's death was a wake-up call, a sharp reminder that finally pulled me out of the fog I'd been living in. I gave Joel a child, a life for a life. The debt I owed has long been repaid. From now on, I am no longer Mrs. Joel, no longer Lucas's mother. I am simply myself. I am Helen. I am the Helen who is picking up that college acceptance letter I dropped at 17, ready to embark on the journey I should have taken long ago. Chapter 8. We kept my mother's funeral small and quiet. After all, she had spent so many years dedicated to the family, becoming estranged from relatives and losing touch with friends. There wasn't really anyone who would have made the effort to come to her funeral, so I saved that money and chose a beautiful plot for her burial. I originally bought just one plot, but then I ended up buying 2 more because Clara said that when I'm buried there, she wants to be buried right beside me too. Best friends in life and best ghost friends in death, she said. No matter what, we'd still have each other to chat with. Reincarnation wouldn't be so lonely. Oscar, fully agreeing, raised his little hand and said he wanted a plot too. Clara flicked his forehead and told him to wait until he was older to choose for himself. You're too young, she said. If you buy one now and don't like it later, you'll just make a fuss. What had started as a somber matter was now light-hearted and cheerful thanks to them, and the heaviness in my heart began to lift. Oscar, however, was left feeling disappointed about not having his own burial plot. On the way back, he held my hand and said, "Mommy, then buy me an ice cream and I won't be sad anymore." Clara scolded him, saying he wasn't sad at all, reminding him that he had just eaten a cone earlier and that I wasn't allowed to buy him another. Oscar, ever the actor, gave me a pitiful look, eyes wide and pleading. My heart melted instantly. Ignoring Clara's fierce glare, I was just about to say I'd buy him one when a sharp, angry shout rang out from behind us. "She's my mom. You can't call her that." Lucas came charging at us from nowhere, violently shoving Oscar to the ground. Oscar's palms hit the dirt, and his small, soft hands immediately scraped against the ground, drawing blood. His lips trembled and he began to cry. "Mommy, it hurts." My heart shattered. I picked him up, comforting him while glaring icily at Lucas, who stood with clenched fists, red-eyed and glaring right back at me. Lucas flinched under my gaze, his pupils shrinking. His expression was stubborn, his tone accusatory as he reminded me word by word, "I'm your son." I frowned deeply and told him, "I don't have a son as mean as you." Lucas froze. Tears welled up in his eyes, falling in large drops, but he tried hard to suppress his emotions, wiping his face roughly with his sleeve. He lifted his chin defiantly, his voice fierce as he warned, "If you don't come back home, Dad's going to bring another woman into the house." Of course I knew that. Lately, I'd been bombarded with taunting text messages and countless pictures of Joel with various women, all dripping with innuendo. I had blocked and deleted them, but they just kept coming. In the end, I had to change my phone number. Joel hadn't learned a thing. He still thought this same old tactic would always work on me. But I no longer cared about him. Why would I care what he did with others? My expression remained calm as I gently patted Oscar's back, soothing him. Towards Lucas, however, I was cold and indifferent. "Well, that's perfect. You can just go ahead and get yourself a new mom." Lucas looked at me in disbelief. It seemed like it had only just dawned on him that my attitude toward him had drastically changed, and that perhaps I no longer wanted him. After all, Lucas was still a child and he couldn't help but cry. The more he cried, the louder it became. He clung to my leg, sitting on the ground and throwing a tantrum, hiccuping through his sobs. You have to come back with me. You're not allowed to be someone else's mom." Oscar had already stopped crying. He held onto my neck, wide-eyed as he looked down at Lucas, wailing and throwing a fit on the ground. Then, scrunching up his little eyebrows in distaste, he turned to me and said, "Mom, I don't want this brother. He cries so ugly." Lucas heard him and momentarily stopped his sobbing. I took the opportunity to pull my leg free and coldly glanced at the bodyguards watching from the side of the road. Then I said, "That's right, he's not your brother. You don't have to bother with him." The bodyguards hesitated before stepping forward to help their young master. Lucas stared at me, his eyes vacant as if my words had truly broken his heart. But I simply held Oscar in my arms, turned around with Clara and walked away. I didn't give him another glance. Chapter 9. Getting a divorce certificate from Joel wasn't going to be easy, especially once he belatedly realized that my mother had passed away. The parade of women who had been bombarding me with messages suddenly disappeared, and there were no more annoying disturbances. Joel showed up at my doorstep again, but this time he wasn't wearing a suit or style to perfection. His hair hung loosely, his face was pale, and he looked somewhat disheveled, clearly not in a good state. Seemed he had finally understood. When I said I wanted a divorce, I meant it. Some things indeed needed to be discussed, so I let both of them inside. Lucas unexpectedly was quiet this time. He stood by Joel's side, clutching his father's pants, but his eyes were fixed on me, full of cautious longing. But no matter how he looked at me, I didn't return his gaze. I acted as if he wasn't there. Joel sat across from me, his expression showing guilt, his voice hoarse as he said, "I'm sorry, Helen. I didn't know your mom's illness was that serious. Why didn't you tell me sooner? If I had known earlier, I could have hired the best medical team in the country to treat her. No matter the cost, I would have made sure she got better." I felt calm inside and told him, "It was late-stage cancer. There was no cure. Telling you wouldn't have made a difference. Besides, she was my mother, not yours. It's normal that you didn't care. I was with her the day she passed, and she had no regrets. It was peaceful." Joel's pupils trembled and his face turned even paler. He forced a weak smile, his dry lips twitching. "We're husband and wife. She was my mother too." The words were so absurd, as if he had shown my mother any respect or care while she was alive. I couldn't help but laugh mockingly. Joel closed his eyes, embarrassed. After a moment, he tried to steer the conversation away, saying, "Let me take care of the funeral arrangements." "Oh, no need." I cut him off, not wanting to watch him pretend any longer. I pulled out a document from beneath the table, already prepared, and pushed it toward him. Before I could speak, Joel shot to his feet, his voice cracking as he exclaimed, "Helen!" His eyes were red and his body trembled uncontrollably. Suddenly he grabbed my hand, dropping to one knee in front of me. His tone was almost pleading. "No, I won't agree to this. I refuse, Helen. I will never agree to a divorce." I slowly pulled my hand out of his grasp. Before Joel could spiral into madness, I gestured to the contract on the table. "Look at it closely first." Joel froze for a moment, then picked up the document from the table. Realizing it wasn't a divorce agreement, he breathed a sigh of relief. But as soon as Joel continued reading, his brow furrowed deeply. The hand holding the paper tightened, and his breathing became increasingly rapid as he angrily flipped through the pages. By the time he reached the last page, where my youthful signature was scrawled, his eyes were bloodshot and he was practically grinding his teeth. "A deal. So all these years you stayed by my side loving me. It was all just to repay my grandmother's favor? A transaction." What Joel held in his hands was the contract his grandmother and I had signed all those years ago. The contract explicitly outlined everything I had done for Joel over the years. It wasn't out of love. It was simply to fulfill each clearly priced obligation in the contract. Joel stared at those black and white words for a long time, his expression completely blank. And that's when I delivered the final crushing blow with a smile. "Joel, why don't you ask me now if I love you?" Chapter 10. Joel stormed out, slamming the door behind him. All that remained was Lucas, quietly sobbing, clutching the hem of his shirt and refusing to leave. He couldn't quite grasp the argument between his parents, what contract, what deal. But he did understand one thing. Mom was leaving Dad. She was leaving them. He slowly walked over to me, his tear-streaked face finally free from the usual defiant bratty attitude. His eyes were filled with fear and uncertainty as he tentatively reached for my fingers, his voice choked with sobs. "Mom, I'm sorry." It had been so long since I'd heard him call me Mom. But now, as I looked at Lucas and heard him say that word, all I could think of was that rainy evening, the one where he had locked me and my mother outside. I couldn't find any softness left in my heart for him. In fact, looking at him now, all I felt was a simmering, trembling anger. I had carried him for 9 months, given birth to him, and we were supposed to be connected, mother and son. But his heart was tied only to Joel. He looked down on my mother, looked down on my background. He thought that only his father was someone truly important, even though Joel was hardly ever around. When Joel did occasionally remember to attend one of his school events, Lucas would be overjoyed. proudly showing off his father to all his classmates. I never got that kind of treatment. I shook his hand off and sneered. Mom, I'm just your nanny, right? Other nannies you can get rid of when you're upset, but not me. That's why you hated me and kept trying to push me away, isn't it? Well, now I'm giving you what you wanted. Lucas shook his head furiously, trying to hug me while pretending not to understand. No, you're my mom. I pushed him away, grabbing him by the shoulders and making him stand straight. Lucas, you're not 3 anymore. You always say you're a man, so it's time you take responsibility for what you've done. I called the bodyguard who had always taken care of Lucas and sent him out of the house. Before closing the door, I remembered what Lucas had said to me through the intercom that rainy day when I stood outside, drenched to the bone. I gave a small bitter smile and whispered, "Your mother doesn't want you anymore, Lucas." I slammed the door shut. Lucas threw himself at the door, banging on it, his wails echoing through the hallway. But no one came to comfort him. A few days later, Joel asked to meet. He had agreed to the divorce. I stared at that text for a long time, then prepared some things in advance and arrived on time for the meeting. Joel wore a custom black suit, his expression cold and distant, once again exuding that unapproachable air of superiority. On the table lay the divorce agreement I had drafted. All I asked for was $50 million in cash. I didn't want the car, the house, or custody of the child. For Joel's wealth, this was practically walking away with nothing. But I wasn't planning on returning the company shares and jewelry he had gifted me when we were deeply in love. After all, I had spent 10 years with him, helped him heal, and even gave him a child. I wasn't about to leave empty-handed. Joel watched coldly as I signed my name on the paper. When I pushed the agreement toward him, he remained still, his hands clasped on his lap, showing no intention of moving. A smirk tugged at Joel's lips as he stared at me, practically spitting the words through gritted teeth. You lied to me. Do you think you can just walk away so easily? I looked at him for a moment, calmly asking, Do you want revenge? Joel let out a mocking laugh, leaning forward, his tone icy and full of disdain. Do you think you're worthy? His gaze scanned over my face and he growled through clenched teeth. You want to run to leave me, but I won't let you. I'll make sure you stay by my side forever. You won't be going anywhere. We stared at each other in silence, locked in a tense standoff. After a long moment, I sighed and pulled a stack of medical records from my bag.
I'm pregnant, Joel.
Joel froze, the icy mask on his face shattering instantly. Chapter 11. Joel snatched the medical reports from my hand. His long fingers trembled slightly as they gently traced the blurry, unrecognizable shape on the ultrasound. How strange, he liked children. But once they were born, he didn't seem to care much for them. Lucas had grown up with more attention from the bodyguard than from his own father. Are all men like this? It didn't matter anymore. I said calmly, Sign it, Joel. I'll have the baby after we're divorced. Joel looked up at me, his brow furrowed, his lips parting as if to say something. I locked eyes with him and added, You saw how difficult it was when I gave birth to Lucas. Don't make this harder on me, okay? Joel didn't say anything after that. He remained silent for a long time before finally picking up the pen and signing the divorce papers. I had everything prepared, and while he was still processing it all, I pushed him to finalize the divorce that very afternoon. Once the papers were in my hands, I felt a wave of relief. I was finally free. As we left the civil affairs office, Joel suggested taking me home, but I declined. He frowned and said, You're pregnant now. How can you manage alone? There's a nanny at home to take care of you. I'll rehire the nutritionist and... I raised the divorce certificate and waved it in front of him. Joel glanced warily at my belly and fell silent. But he couldn't resist asking, So when will you come back? I knew what he was thinking. Because I was pregnant, he thought he had to give in to whatever I wanted for now. Once the baby was born and everything settled, he assumed he'd have plenty of time to get remarried and set things right. He still didn't believe we'd truly be separated. But that was okay, I'd give him time to face reality. My taxi arrived at the curb. As I got into the car, I saw Joel hesitate, torn between wanting to stop me and being unsure of how to act. It was almost laughable. He always showered me with care when I was pregnant, tried to win me back when I was disappointed, and only gave me something in return after I had already sacrificed so much. It was as if showing me kindness had to come with conditions. For the sake of my future peace, I warned him, keep Lucas away from me. I don't want to see him again. And you too. With that, I told the driver to go, leaving Joel standing there with a dark expression on his face. Clara and I had already booked our tickets. When I told her the good news of my divorce, she was so happy she immediately opened a bottle of red wine to celebrate with me. The next day, we began our nationwide tour. We took Oscar along with us to see the vast herds of cattle and sheep on the Hulumber grasslands, the golden sunrise over Tibet's snow-capped mountains, the first snowfall at the Forbidden City, and the misty rain season in Jiangnan. We had the time of our lives. Oscar, with his strong constitution like his mother, never once spoiled the fun. In fact, he was the star of the trip, always full of energy and enthusiasm. Truly a little angel sent from above. In the wide open winds of freedom, I felt like I was coming back to life. Following my best friend from years past with her little boy in tow, we traveled to all the places that I had once dreamed of visiting during my youth. It felt as if the soul that had been trapped on that hospital bed at 17 had finally, after 10 years, awakened at this very moment. Of course, the journey wasn't entirely smooth. My phone was practically blown up with calls from Joel. I wasn't pregnant. It was just a lie to fool him. When Joel first heard the news, he was absolutely furious. He nearly flew over to confront me, but with just one sentence, "We're already divorced, Joel. Can't you let me go?" He stopped in his tracks. Joel and Lucas were alike in many ways. Both cared deeply about appearances and their pride. If Joel were to chase after me now, clinging on and behaving irrationally, it would be beneath him. So Joel stopped contacting me, just like in the countless Cold Wars we had experienced before. But this time I didn't stay at home struggling with sadness, consumed by thoughts of him, only to eventually call him, lower my head and beg for reconciliation. This time I was happy. The trivial burdens of family life no longer tied me down. I opened my arms, embracing nature and embracing the new world that was mine. And the world embraced me back with warmth. There was nothing left that could make me sad anymore. A year later, when it was time for Oscar to start elementary school, Clara and I concluded our joyful journey. The day I returned home, I saw an expensive luxury car parked downstairs. Joel was leaning against the car, his long neck tilted back, staring up at the windows of my apartment. He stood tall and imposing, entirely out of place in the humble surroundings, drawing curious glances and whispers from the neighbors. I went about my evening routine, eating dinner, showering and changing into my pajamas. As night fell and I prepared for bed, I looked outside. He was still there, like a lone pine tree standing under the dim streetlights. With a sigh, I reluctantly went downstairs to meet him. As soon as Joel saw me, he stood up straight, his eyes greedily scanning every inch of me. At last, he seemed to realize that in the year I'd been gone, I had been doing just fine. There was a hint of sadness in his gaze. But quickly, he forced a smile and said, "Helen, come back home. This past year, Lucas has been acting out, not focusing on school, crying and asking for his mom." Seeing that I wasn't moved, Joel's voice grew quieter. The soft evening breeze rustled the leaves, the old streetlights casting a faint glow beside him. At last, he dropped the pretense of using our son as an excuse and whispered, "It's me. I've missed you."
I'm sorry.
I laughed suddenly and asked him, "You've done a lot of things you should be sorry for. Which one are you apologizing for?" A glimmer of hope lit up in Joel's eyes. He took a step forward and quickly said, "I've never cheated, Helen, neither physically nor emotionally. You know my issues, I just wanted to see if you still cared about me. I'm sorry about your mom. And I'm sorry for ignoring you and making you sad before." He rambled on, saying how there wasn't a single day this past year that he hadn't thought about me. He said he had seriously reflected on everything. But these were things I no longer needed. I told him, "You see, you've managed just fine without me for this whole year. Joel, you don't really need me. You're just used to my presence. You just don't want to let go." Joel's eyes suddenly turned red, and he shook his head, insisting it wasn't true. But then I asked him, "Why aren't you asking me that question anymore?" Joel's lips trembled slightly, and his expression showed fear. He pressed his lips together, refusing to speak. So I sighed and answered for him, "Of course I loved you. What do you think kept me with you for so long? If it had only been out of gratitude, then after I gave birth to Lucas and after you started working at the company, I could have left." Joel forced a smile that looked more painful than crying. Tears fell as he tried to move forward and hug me, but I held out my hand, stopping him, and took a step back. I calmly said, "But all of that is in the past. Joel, I've let you go completely, and it's time for you to move on." Joel couldn't let go. He grabbed me tightly, his arms squeezing me so hard it felt like my bones would break. His tears wouldn't stop, and he kept muttering words of refusal. He couldn't accept that I no longer loved him. He began to beg me, frantically digging through his memories, trying to find traces of our happy past. But I still resolutely pried his hands off me, pushed him away, and turned to go upstairs. That night, Joel cried so loudly outside that the entire neighborhood couldn't sleep. In the end, someone called the police, reporting him for disturbing the peace. The officers came and took him away. The next day, Joel drove back to the neighborhood, his eyes horribly swollen, and fell asleep inside his car. On the third day, I passed an online interview with a large company. I quickly packed my things and left while Joel wasn't paying attention. Later, Joel came to my new office a few times to find me, but I either avoided him or bluntly told him harsh truths. After being together for so many years, he knew how to hurt me, and I knew exactly what words would stab at his heart. Eventually, he stopped coming. Then I got a phone call from Clara. She complained in utter disdain, telling me that Joel, or sometimes Lucas, would randomly show up at my old house to stay there. In my rush to get divorced, I had forgotten to change the locks. I was silent for a long time. Finally, I said, "It's fine. Don't worry about it." When they were ready to let go, they'd naturally stop coming. And until they left my house for good, I wouldn't be going back. My life had started anew. This time I'd take big strides forward and never look back.